Hypothalamus Artificial Intelligence, HI, presents its vision of the new artificial intelligence, based on From Human Brains to Artificial Brains. A new way of looking at artificial intelligence that could change the world as we know it. Short lecture prepared by Jesús Velásquez-Bermúdez. From Human Brains to Artificial Brains. Artificial intelligence is traditional modeling based on neural networks. Decision-making artificial intelligence is the modeling resulting from the artificial business brains. Velásquez, in 2021, published on SSRN, the paper Artificial Hypothalamus, Artificial Intelligence and Mathematical Programming Integration, in which the foundations of artificial brains, and more specifically of the hypothalamus, are laid. The article, and others later, carefully studies the relationships between the structures of the neocortex, with those formed when a mathematical problem is atomized, to use large-scale optimization methodologies, oriented to the partitioning and decomposition of systems, and they define the artificial brain in semi-detail. This is a disruptive vision of artificial intelligence, considering the power of computers, the evolution of mathematics, and the Internet of Things. This conference explains in a summarized way this evolution, based on the current state of AI. A complementary document is Artificial Brains, Augmented Artificial Intelligence, Artificial Neocortex plus Artificial Hypothalamus plus Artificial Hippocampus. Human intelligence has evolved along with human beings. To understand this process, HI describes human intelligence as composed of three intelligences: mental intelligence, creative intelligence, and mathematical intelligence. HI is focused on decision-making artificial intelligence, which corresponds to mathematical intelligence. Human intelligence has evolved along with human beings. To understand this process, HI describes human intelligence as composed of three intelligences. Mental intelligence underpins the mental models that every human being requires to start making their decisions. Human knowledge is supported by three types of intelligences. Mental intelligence, it is the abstraction or conception of what is perceived by individuals about a given issue or problem. Mental models are constructed with the knowledge, experiences, assumptions, perceptions, intuitions, informal inductions, deductions, and values of the individual. They are elementary models that are not exposed in public and therefore have a validity limited to the individual. They have their origin in the evolution of the human being, hominization, from the most primitive ancestors, Australopithecus, to the appearance of our species as we know it today, Homo sapiens. All human beings manage mental models, very quick to solve, and, in their absence, easily copy themselves from a more influential individual, and more recently, are implanted in human beings through the ochlocracy of mental models distributed by social networks. When intelligence works under this model, we will call it mental intelligence, which exists and develops in all humans. Mental intelligence and pattern recognition. Mental model is oriented to identify patterns, its foundations are not mathematical, and respond to data processing, and evaluation of eventual, and systematic, experiences. It is based on good practices. Pattern recognition is a data analysis method that uses machine artificial intelligence algorithms to automatically recognize patterns and regularities in data. This data can be anything from text and images to sounds, or other definable qualities. Pattern recognition systems can recognize familiar patterns quickly and accurately. Pattern recognition is the activity that most performs the human being, for example identifies images of people, foods, hydroclimatic conditions, traffic conditions, texts, sounds, and etc. All this with the aim of establishing the conditions of the environment, in the past, the present, and the future, and based on this knowledge make decisions. How the brain identifies patterns is not properly known, but it is mimicked by traditional artificial intelligence. Then, the starting point of the name of artificial intelligence is associated to the pattern recognition. Today, the association is direct, and it seems that artificial intelligence is reduced to this function of the human brain, what has concentrated great amount of scientific research in working in this direction, forgetting other human brain functions. It seems that artificial intelligence is reduced to the emulation of mental intelligence, whose function is little known and explained. That is why it is known by scientists that neural networks can predict how a system will behave, but that in general the parameters found cannot be explained, they have no clear content, just as the humans cannot explain how this function works in the human brain. But this approach cannot be said to have been unsuccessful, as it effectively and massively replaces activities that ordinary humans did not think machines could perform. At first, neural networks were aimed at finding ways of connectivity of artificial neurons, seeking to improve the results of prediction. Something like a statistical model in which many algebraic models are tested, until a good solution is found. Little has evolved to try to explain content in this connectivity. This is the case with GPT. Pattern recognition is a basic human skill, for which we have no explanation. The essence of the so-called artificial intelligence is mental intelligence represented from the study of biological neurons, to emulate and surpass human pattern recognition. In 1943, Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts created the concept of artificial neural networks. They published the paper, A Logical Calculus of the Ideas Immanent in Nervous Activity. McCulloch and Pitts tried to understand how the brain could produce highly complex patterns, by using many basic cells that are connected. They designed their system based on as they believed our brains work, and patterned it after the biological model of how neurons work with each other. The neural networks were growing, and in practice they took the name of artificial intelligence, displacing other methodologies and technologies that also generate artificial intelligence in the machines. As the diagram presents it, a neural network is an interconnected group of nodes that allows computers to recognize patterns in data. This area of science corresponds to predictive analytics. Starting from the perceptron, the first artificial neuron created, the knowledge of neuronal modeling has evolved, currently having multiple types of artificial neural nets, specialized in performing specific pattern recognition. For this, the basic patterns of ANNs are modified. Artificial neural network modeling has evolved to the point where networks with specialized structures can perform specialized functions. Convolutional artificial neural nets. They correspond to ANNs specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. GPT is the state-of-the-art of the standard artificial intelligence. Generative Pre-trained Transformers, GPT, are a family of neural network models that uses the transformer architecture, and is a key advancement in artificial intelligence, powering generative AI applications such as ChatGPT. GPT models give applications the ability to create human-like text and content, images, music, and more, and answer questions conversationally. Organizations across industries are using GPT models and generative AI for conda, text digesting, content generation, and search bots. Artificial neural networks have concentrated on trying to mimic the way humans detect patterns. It has been a totally successful process. However, they cannot explain what will happen to human decisions. Creative intelligence is the fundamental basis for the development of mathematical theories that support mathematical models. For this is an area of knowledge that is still unknown. To evolve from mental intelligence to mathematical intelligence, the human being requires another type of intelligence that allows him to perform the analyses to understand and discover the models that govern the universe that is written in the language of mathematics, Galileo Galilei. We will call this intelligence analytical creative intelligence. This intelligence can be considered as the highest level of human intelligence, since it is what allows to grow in the discovery of mathematical laws, and in general new knowledge, which is the engine of the scientific and technologic of humanity. In practice, very few humans have this ability, and discipline. While humans in prehistoric times did not have access to mathematical intelligence, because they were creating it, today it is the engine of human knowledge, and ideally should be handled by all humans. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Therefore, its management must be part of the artificial intelligence that humanity is creating. The same thing happens with creative intelligence, the knowledge created by scientists, and the way to produce it is part of today's human intelligence. Proof of the above is the speed with which we produce knowledge. It took many centuries, hundreds, to produce algebra, but mathematical knowledge every day occurs faster, and extends its borders. For example, since 1947, with the appearance of the digital computer, a new science has been created: mathematics for computers, first monoprocessors, today parallels. This must be part of the artificial intelligence of the future. When the previous trend changes, humanity will have begun its disappearance process. Mathematical intelligence underpins the mathematical models that some humans develop to make their decisions. Second, mathematical model is a scientific representation which make use of mathematical language to describe or to explain the portion of reality that is of particular interest to an individual. It is the result of the research carried out by certain humans. The mathematical models are growing as analytical tools that provide greater processing speed to the investigation. For its understanding requires formal training in mathematics and in the science being modeled. These models increase the intelligence of human beings, creating large differences, chasms, between them. When intelligence works under this model, we will call it mathematical intelligence. This ability to understand mathematics, and to handle it, does not extend to all humans. It is necessary to acquire knowledge and experience, to handle this intelligence properly. At present, its development is directly related to the ability to handle computational and mathematical technologies. Mathematical intelligence and decision-making. Decision-making process is the final objective of any person or organization, which seeks to make the best decisions from its point of view, its criterion. This process, when carried out in real time, requires a great capacity for mathematical calculation, to handle the complexity of the real world, which increases over time, since the universe increases its entropy at each moment. When humanity began its evolution, it only had mental models to support its decisions, which seriously limited the speed of the evolution of the species, due to the little, almost zero, capacity of mental models, which led the human being to make decisions with very few calculations, or without them. Thanks to analytical intelligence, human beings developed their mathematical intelligence, which has led us to Industry 4.0. Since the creation of AI, and the advent of the computer, it can be said that predictive methodologies displaced prescriptive ones, in what was called artificial intelligence. For the convenience of the reader, decision-making artificial intelligence, DMAI, will be presented in comparison to traditional artificial intelligence. The first big difference is that DMAI is based on the study of mathematical intelligence, which focuses on the representation of the physical world through algebraic formulas, or through differential calculus, and solves problems using exact mathematical algorithms, aimed at finding the best decisions. This area of science corresponds to prescriptive analytics. To develop creative intelligence, it is necessary to understand the lives of creative scientists and their way of working, then it will be possible to try to model that process. Prior to the birth of computers, the scientist's routine could be summarized in iterative processing based on formulation of a creative idea attached to a theory, conducting experiments with the aim of validating the theory or finding errors to reject or to adjust the theory. If the experiments validate the theory, the creative process is over. Otherwise, the theory is adjusted, and new experiments are carried out. This process can be slow, due to the time consumed in each experiment, which can include setting up the experiment environment, which could involve complex processes, mainly when a laboratory with ideal conditions must be built. The creation of computers, which are the essence of mathematical intelligence, begins to transform this process, due to the possibility of computers in the process of experimentation. As the power of computers has grown, from the ENIAC computer to today's quantum computers, the involvement of mathematical modeling is playing an increasingly important role in the experimentation process, which can be carried out automatically following predictive and prescriptive artificial intelligence principles. An automatic experimentation process, carried out by a computer, once an experiment has been performed and evaluated, could follow the next algorithm. If the experiment validates the theory, the experimentation process is over. Otherwise, adjustments must be made to the theory or to experiments. For example, adjustments to the theory may involve variations to the equations. Adjustments to experiments may involve changes to the experiment environment. It is evident that with today's computational power, this process can be very fast, and the scientist can advance very quickly in his research. The experimentation process can be enriched with predictive artificial intelligence, which can learn from real-time experiments and the history of previous experiments. Prescriptive artificial intelligence can help improve theory by formulating and solving problems that require adjustments to the theory's equations. In this way, the scientist's learning is accelerated. Another contribution of computer technologies to creative intelligence is digital twins. This aspect is linked to the need to carry out experiments that in many cases require the construction of a physical prototype. Before the existence and growth of computers, laboratories were physical and, in many cases, were built for an experiment. Today, digital twins can function as virtual laboratories and can be linked as input and/or output of mathematical artificial intelligence, eliminating the need for physical labs. Everything seems to indicate that creative artificial intelligence is ready to be implemented today. The essence of mathematical intelligence modeling is based on the study of the human brain, based on neuroscientific studies. The result is the production of artificial brains. The creator of the human brain conceived it as the integration of three main organs, or systems: neocortex, hypothalamus and hippocampus. The hypothalamus is part of the thalamus. The artificial brains corresponds to the scientific foundations, more specifically mathematical fundamentals, that allow to connect multiple mathematical models, algorithms or robots, exchanging information between them to obtain a common goal, and act as holistic intelligence of the organizations, or parts therein. Like the human brain, the artificial brain is composed of the following artificial components: neocortex, hypothalamus, and hippocampus. The neocortex contains millions of neurons that communicate with each other, to capture the world that occurs around the human being. The connectivity of these neurons does not occur based on a dense network that connects all neurons to each other. Connectivity is based on a sparse network, which can be assimilated to a sparse array. Neuroscientific studies associate the network of neurons of the cerebral cortex in layers, and in columns, connected in an organized hierarchical way. In mathematical models, it is common to use a matrix that relates columns with variables, and equations with rows. The normal thing is that these matrices are sparse, structurally similar to that of the human cortex. Hawkins proposes the concept of regions, groups of cells organized hierarchically, interconnected, but with a low density of links, sparse. This is the fundamental representation of the 3D connectivity of neurons in the neocortex. This structure has the same characteristics as those generated when a monolithic model is divided and decomposed into an atomized model, to process it in parallel. This diagram shows a three-level structure, result of partitioning and decomposition of a system, using a simple methodology of large-scale optimization, like Bender's theory or Lagrangian relaxation. Based on the concepts of partitioning and decomposition, it is possible to decouple a system, to obtain vertical structures partially similar like of the human neocortex. Cross-decomposition makes it possible to establish complex optimization processes, in which multiple large-scale methodologies are used, which allows to adjust the problems to the most convenient methodology for the solution of each subproblem. From the point of view of multi-layer structures, cross-decomposition gives rise to the exchange of information between multiple layers, of different columns, such as the real structure of the human neocortex. Emphasizing that Hai is not an expert in neuroscience, its interpretation of the functioning of the brain is presented. The cerebral cortex stores all the connectivity of the neural networks that make up the brain. The hypothalamus is a region of the brain that plays a crucial role in regulating essential bodily functions, including body temperature, hunger, thirst, sleep, mood, and hormone release. In addition, the hypothalamus helps maintain homeostasis, like the body's internal balance, through its connections with the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system. It can be said that it is the motor of the brain. It is a vital structure for the harmonious functioning of the body, acting as a central control center for various physiological and behavioral functions. The hypothalamus must coordinate all the processes that the human being carries out. The artificial hypothalamus must connect the multiple mathematical models, algorithms, that are part of the artificial brain, exchanging information between them to obtain a common goal, mathematically an objective function. This activity must be autonomous, permanent, and based on distributed processing. The hypothalamus is the organ that ensures the proper functioning of the human being. The connectivity of neurons in the cortex determines how the hypothalamus should function. The hippocampus. Storage structures and processes from the decision-making that must be faced permanently. The artificial hippocampus is based on the mathematical synthesis of the information generated by algorithms and problem-solving processes, to use it in new runs of these algorithms to speed up the problem solution in real time. Artificial hippocampus store, like in the humans, the experience, and the knowledge acquired over time. The hippocampus is responsible for managing memory, which interacts with the hypothalamus, to determine the actions that the human being will perform, that is, decisions. Artificial entrepreneurial brains are based on these hypotheses. Donald Olding Hebb is best known for his theory of Hebbian learning, which he introduced in his classic work The Organization of Behavior in 1949. Hebb has been described as the father of neuropsychology and neural networks. The central concept of Hebb's theory is summed up in the phrase, cells that fire together, wire together. According to this idea, when an A neuron is repeatedly involved in the activation of a B neuron, the synapses between them are strengthened. Hebb's theory has shown that learning does not increase the number of neurons, but it does increase the connectivity between them. This principle suggests that the concurrence of neural activity is the basis for learning and memory. Synaptic strengthening. When a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron are activated simultaneously, the connections between them are strengthened. Activity-dependent plasticity. The efficiency of synaptic connections is not static but can be modified as a function of neuronal activity. This plasticity is essential for adaptive learning and memory. Hippocampus store the experience, and the knowledge acquired over time in the human brain. The learning process of the human being is concretized in memory, which accumulates information to face each new situation using the accumulation of knowledge that has been made up to that moment. This information is stored in the hippocampus where the data is organized according to its age. Like any physical element, its use affects its reliability, and that is why short memory, the one that stores the data of the last days, begins to fail with age, until it is lost, while long-term memory can store very sharp data, but that require greater access time to locate them, remember. The operation of the artificial hippocampus is presented as an expert system that must store two types of knowledge. Formulation: the components of mathematical models, and historical data of the results generated solving the mathematical problems, using large-scale optimization methodologies. This information is used as starting point in future uses of mathematical models to support decision-making. The information is stored in the hippocampus where the data is organized according to its age. Like any physical element, its use affects its reliability, and that is why short memory, the one that stores the data of the last days, begins to fail with age, until it is lost, while long-term memory can store very sharp data, but that require greater access time to locate them, remember. From the point of view of one part of the artificial hippocampus processes the information stored in the other part, to develop a learning process. Learning takes the form of the generation of new neural connections, which must be stored in the artificial cerebral cortex, to be used in the future by the artificial hypothalamus. This high vision of artificial intelligence, built from the workings of the human brain, is currently unique in the world. Albert Einstein said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world." Thank you very much for your attention.